We will begin with the first panel session, looking at the national enterprise in 2040, the maritime contribution. And I'm Viktorija, Starych-Samuoliene, co-founder and director of strategy at the Council on Geostrategy, and it's my pleasure to chair the session. And I would now like to invite the panelists to join me on stage. So it's Rear Admiral James Parkin, Dr. Rob Johnson, Andrew Thomis, and Geoff Searle. So the maritime domain and the national enterprise are inextricably linked and will continue to be so in the 2040s. With this panel, we will seek to define this relationship and ask how we can create, package, and enact a vision of our Navy which all stakeholders can support. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Rear Admiral James Parkin, who is Director Develop at the Royal Navy, Dr. Rob Johnson, who leads Secretary of State's Office for Net Assessment and Challenge at the Ministry of Defense, Geoff Searle, Program Director, Future Business and Technology at BAE Systems, and Andrew Thomis, Chief Executive at Cohort. So we have a wonderful mix of naval representation, academia, and Whitehall, and 2 industry speakers. We have only 60 minutes and 4 panelists. So we will begin with a set of questions that I will ask each of them, and then we will have around 25 minutes for the Q&A session with the audience. So perhaps Rear Admiral James Parkin, we will begin with you. And could you please tell us, how is the Royal Navy developing for the world in the 2040s? And particularly, how should the Navy, with the support of the nation, respond to a world increasingly dependent on the sea?
Thanks, Victoria. And I think the advantages of going in panel 5 is that no one really wants anyone here to repeat what we heard yesterday. I think yesterday, across the keynote speeches, the announcements, and the panels, the audience, both online and in the room, would have heard a pretty compelling explanation of why it is that the nation's relationship with the maritime is as important as it ever was. But perhaps the nation's relationship with the maritime sector is only now really coming into focus. Events in the southern Red Sea probably weren't new at explaining to the wider population and the rest of Europe and the United States about the importance of that particular waterway. But given the impact of the Ever Given blockage in the Suez Canal, given the reliance we have on maritime trade from the merchant marine sector, it's clear that the conversation has shifted. When I joined the Navy 3 decades ago, it was drummed into us at Dartmouth, the 70, 80, 90 statistics. 70% of the world is covered by the ocean. 80% of the world's population live within 60 miles of the sea. And 90% of the UK's trade by value comes in through our ports. But actually now, it's 97, 98, 99. 97% of Britain's trade by volume comes through our ports. 98% of the City of London's financial transactions rely on undersea cables. That's 10 trillion pounds a day, 3 times the annual GDP of this country, going through British undersea cables every single day, and 99% of global internet traffic going on cables. I think given the way in which we are an increasingly and perhaps invariably permanently interconnected world, those 97, 98, 99, which between them account for everything we eat, everything we do, everything we see, and even to a degree keeping all the lights on without fail, has perhaps been taken for granted. And the contribution of the Navy in securing those has perhaps also had a renaissance. We've seen the RFA Proteus alongside HMS Belfast. We had this first seabed warfare ship we've had for decades. It's not the first seabed warfare ship. HMS Challenger, decommissioned in the early 90s, was specifically designed to send human beings onto the seabed to do that sort of activity. But what Proteus has done, not just in its rapid and innovative acquisition, but just the very fact of its existence, has galvanized a conversation with industry. I hosted 2 years ago a seabed warfare conference in Portsmouth with representatives of oil and gas industry, with merchant marine sector, with divers, fisheries, and the telecommunications companies. And for the first time ever, we were able to explain that spectrum between seabed security, not necessarily a military task, through to seabed protection, where we help the civilian companies that almost invariably operate this underwater infrastructure, through to seabed warfare that we've already seen play out, both deliberately in the Baltic and Nord Stream, but even accidentally with what happened with the dragging cable of a ship sunk by the Houthis. So wherever you look, wherever you study and whatever you're worried about, the role of the Royal Navy today and into the 2040s, I think, is shifting in consciousness, but it's also shifting in relevance. And I think it would be remiss of us as a service to not reflect that this is the moment to make the case, not for investment in the Navy at the expense of any of the sister services or anything else that governments do, but investment in the Navy in its own right, because we're an insurance policy. And just as for a decade or so, Type 45 destroyers were written off as irrelevant to stabilization operations, if we hadn't bought those vessels, if we hadn't invested in the world's best air defense system, we would not have been able to defeat those threats to billion-pound cargoes going through the Red Sea. So I think just as the Royal Navy is finding a newfound awareness, the relevance of it has never been as important as it is today. And I think we should collectively get used to not just talking about sea lines of communication, those interconnected ports, but the seabed lines of communication that keep us in the wealth, health, and happiness we all enjoy here today.
Thank you, Admiral. Rob, you lead the Secretary of State's Office for Net Assessment and Challenge and have done a lot of thinking about strategic advantage. I think Rear Admiral Parkin has just explained very well why maritime matters. But could you please explain more how can we leverage strategic advantage from the sea?
Wow, okay. Let me begin by just a couple of reflections, really. See if this sounds familiar to you. We just had a gigantic pandemic. We've got the rise of aggressive states who are seizing territory. We've been through a global financial crisis. The after effects we're still going through now. And we feel a sort of sense of inadequacy about defence. It feels that we've not quite got enough. And I know that is proportional, of course, to the amount of money in the UK we've invested in welfare. But I'm not describing 2024, am I? I'm describing 1940. We've been here before. And I suppose in my role, one of the things I'm asked to do is to sort of project the future, long term. What does the future look like? And we've got a team here from DCDC who do this as a profession. But I think if you want to know about the next 50 to 100 years, you should really go back 100 years or 70 years. And I'm really glad, Mr. State, you referred us back to our own past. But my injunction to you, all of you, is have you worked it out yet? The fact that we've got fewer personnel, we've got a technological revolution going on, limited funding. There's a greater threat we're all now becoming aware of, particularly from countries like China, although we still refuse to refer to China as a threat at the moment. And we're growing our fleet. There is a palpable sense that we are in that pre-war era, whether we like it or not. And I think the thing we have to do, most of all now, to think about our strategic advantage, priority one is to break the mindset that we've been used to since 1991. If we do that, we're a long way down the track. If we don't break that mindset today, if we don't recognize the situation that we're in, we will not put our efforts into the national endeavour. If you're in business, you'll still be thinking about the profit margin above all else. If you're in academia, you'll be thinking about the next publication. If you're in the Royal Navy, you'll be thinking about your next deployment. My injunction to you, ladies and gentlemen, is this is a national effort now. That is our strategic advantage. And to our allies and partners here, I would say that we have to do this together. My analogy to 1940 is not accidental. It's often said that Britain in 1940 was alone fighting against Nazi Germany. But those of you in the audience know we weren't alone, were we? Australia, New Zealand, what became the Commonwealth. In other words, a number of nations were already engaged in that national and international endeavour together. And I think we need to understand now that we all have a role as allies and partners to look to our investments, the expansion of our armed forces, particularly the Navy, to enact that protection, and not to sit back and expect government to do everything because it hasn't got the ability to do everything, or expect, someone else to pick up the slack. And when I hear, about the inadequacies of UK defence, people often say, "Oh yes, but we always have NATO." And every other NATO nation is doing exactly the same thing. It is down to all of us to do it together. That was Churchill's great injunction. Let us go forward together. The Royal Navy has always been a leading edge in our enterprise economy. If you go back to the late 18th century, the sheer scale of the Royal Navy's production of ropes, of sails and cannon, gunpowder, was in many ways the stimulus to the Industrial Revolution. If you build navies, you will get industrial takeoff. And it's a connection that I think we need to reinvigorate, because the connectivity and the technological revolution is all there in the Navy if we choose to do it. And by the way, only major powers have navies. So it's worth bearing in mind that we are a major power in the United Kingdom because we have a navy and because we have a nuclear capability with it. But we can't be complacent about our strengths. I know that we often will parade them, but remember the 1973 oil shock, for example, within living memory. It was a massive problem in the UK. You've mentioned the Evergreen ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal, the Red Sea choke points at the moment. There's no room for any more complacency. I'm delighted, Minister, that you mentioned about people looking to us for leadership in the UK, and I think that is absolutely the case. Churchill knew that in order to survive against the Hitlerian regime in 1940, it was absolutely vital to bring in the United States. It was just a question of time. And in the dark days of the Battle of the Atlantic, once the United States had come in with the United Kingdom and the Empire and Commonwealth, he said that was the first evening I actually slept soundly in my bed. Until then, until the Americans were in, he couldn't do it. Together, our friends in Australia, New Zealand, Norway has been mentioned yesterday, I'm really pleased to say, Japan, one of the great technological nations of the world, with France. I had the great privilege of visiting on Monday this week. If we do things together, if we are not alone, then we can only succeed. And I would say there's that lovely expression I've learned from the Royal Navy, ready, aye, ready. And the next phrase after that is clear the decks for action. Let's get on with action and implementation, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have changed our mindset. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Mr. Searle, let me turn to you. And you are the Program Director of Future Business and Technology at BAE Systems Naval Ships. How are you and the maritime industrial base working in partnership with the state and the nation?
Thank you, Victoria. I think with the UK maritime base being such an integral part of the maritime defence in the UK, we inevitably have a very close working relationship, and you're between the maritime industries, with the Royal Navy, with the wider government departments, and allies overseas, obviously. But that working relationship is very strong and enduring. Yes, we always have our occasional commercial spats and that sort of thing on how to do it, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, and that relationship is strong to deliver that availability and capability globally. I mean, there are some specific forums which promote that relationship, things like the National Shipbuilding Office, which formed a few years ago, and we all work very closely with them. And of course, they look across the whole UK maritime enterprise, not just defence, led by Rex Cox. And we work with them on things like skills delivery. That's critical to the UK maritime base at the moment, is the development of skills and talent, and to meet our current and future needs. Been looking at things like centres of excellence and how we optimise shipyards of the future to enable us to increase capacity in the UK, increase competitiveness, and make sure we can deliver more for the capacity that we have. And I think working with them, looking at overseas programmes, we've had great success, and working with the bodies such as Defence, Security and Export, the combined business and trade and MOD body. We work very closely with them in looking at international opportunities, and so we do have those very strong relationships. And I think we have got a vibrant maritime industry in the UK, and that does give the UK strategic advantage in the ability to deliver capability and deliver effect. And we have had great export success in recent years, whether you look at the Type 26 exports into Australia and Canada and working with partners there, the Arrowhead exports into Poland, River-class OPVs into Brazil and Thailand, and hopefully more partners to come in that in the future. So it does have that vibrancy, and the benefit of that back to the UK, just as an example, whilst the Canadian and Australian ships are being built in country, the UK supply chain benefits by around £250 million for every ship built. So that's another £5 billion back into the UK economy. So that ongoing relationship between the industrial base, government, MOD, and the Navy is really important. And I fully believe that the collaborative approach is the only way to succeed on this. I've 30 years in shipbuilding, and the greatest success has always been when we've been in collaboration. I led the Aircraft Carrier Alliance for a period, and that was truly collaborative with the MOD as part of the alliance. In the early days of the Type 26 program, we had over 100 MOD staff from DNS based with us, co-located in our program office in Bristol. And that whole development was done collaboratively. The relationships built then still endure in the delivery of that program today. And that really is an important way forward, I think. And we're looking to keep up with the changing threats. We're looking to deliver capability at pace, and the only way we can do that really is through continuing that collaboration. And if you look now at the pipeline of naval shipbuilding going forward, and particularly with the Secretary of State's announcement yesterday on MRSS as well, the demand for naval shipbuilding in the UK will keep the UK maritime base busy for the foreseeable future through to the 2040s. And I think we need to recognise that the only way to deliver that great capability, and the Secretary of State said new golden age of shipbuilding, I think, or new era of shipbuilding, is for us all to work together. Let's make the best use of the capabilities of the individual elements of that UK industrial base, and work with MOD and the Navy to do that. And the need for that collaboration, I think, is more compelling now than it has been in the whole time I've been in the industry. And I think that the last point I'd make about that relationship is the ability to react at pace. And Fleet Commander spoke about it yesterday in the response to the emerging issues in the Red Sea. How the Navy and industry sort of moved to a different setting to a certain extent, and delivered capability insertions, software updates at pace. And I think it shows we can do it if we have the right approach and the right needs. So again, that relationship, that collaborative piece to support spiral development, to enable rapid incremental capability delivery is really another key benefit of that close relationship.
Thank you so much, Mr. Searle. And Mr. Thomis, let me turn to you. And you lead a company called Cohort that is founded on the principle that SME-sized businesses can prosper by being part of a larger group, and also a company that is heavily focused on technology. So I would like to refocus on technological aspect of our discussion. And in your view, what role does the national enterprise play in our ability to develop the technology that the UK has to force multiply its capability?
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah. Well, I think the first point I would make is that the decisions of the customer, the Navy and the Ministry of Defence have an enormous impact on the shape and the capability of the UK industrial base. I think that is a view that wasn't always shared by the Ministry of Defence. There was once a view that perhaps industry was a separate body which would simply do whatever was asked of it at any time of asking. But actually, what you do and the decisions that you make have a huge impact on us, on our shape. So I'd like to make 3 points perhaps about that interface. One is that I think for success, the UK defence industry, and particularly the maritime industry, needs a plurality of businesses of different shapes and sizes. For the kind of advanced platforms, submarines and surface ships that we've had such great success in producing, undoubtedly a business like Geoff's is needed with the breadth and depth of expertise, the scale, the capital investment, the processes and procedures and experience to be able to deliver and manage those huge programs. But by the same token, that's not necessarily where we're going to find the agility and innovation that we're going to need to solve some of those fast-moving technology and operational problems that arise when the unexpected happens on operations or more widely in international affairs. And for that, I think one needs more innovative, agile, fast-moving businesses able to make decisions, which is characteristic of smaller and medium-sized businesses. And I don't just mean startups with 10 people and one brilliant idea. I think they have a great role to play as well, but also businesses that can use that agility and innovation, but use it in a way that enables them to deliver as well. So I think making sure that all of those businesses can participate actively in the national maritime enterprise is very important. A second point I'd make relates to supply chain security. I think, and I'm absolutely positive that this message has certainly hit home, is that it is really very, very important to be able to rely on the supply chain that is providing maritime equipment of all kinds, notably consumables, ammunition, but of course systems and technology as well, and to be able to adapt to those systems and technology without reliance, well, certainly on nations that might be hostile towards us, but also on industries and nations where priorities will be higher elsewhere. And so I think understanding the impact of defence procurement decisions on the supply chain and where that supply chain is coming from is really very, very important indeed. And part of the solution to that will be reaching international agreements. And I know there have been a number of initiatives within NATO and within the European Union as well, which may in time affect us to try and enable that defence supply chain security. But national investment is also something that will be needed. And that means sometimes making choices to look for a national solution where an international solution is already available, but making that choice on the basis of the importance of supply chain. The final point I'd make very briefly is that decisions about the operational concept and the way that operations are to be conducted have a big impact as well. I would pick up 2 examples. I mean, one would be the strong pivot towards uncrewed systems, uncrewed surface and subsurface systems in the Navy, which I think is vital in the circumstances that we are now, where we don't want to put very expensive submarines with large numbers of people on board and surface ships the same into areas of great danger, and we can avoid doing that to some extent with the use of these systems. But getting industry involved with the technology early means that we will be able to adapt and provide those systems in a timely way. So engaging with us at the technology development stage and not leading us into the valley of death, as the phrase has it, where technology ideas are developed but then have nowhere to go. And I think the Navy has become rather good at that with some of its programs recently. Charybdis comes to mind, but that is extremely important, I think, in order to develop the size and shape of the industry in a positive way. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thomis. Rob, so we've heard different perspectives from the Navy, from you, and also from the industry. They also are similar in many respects. the question that I would have for you is, in your view, how can we optimize the relationship and cooperation between the Navy, industry, the government, and the wider society to ensure that we are resilient, competitive, and prosperous?
Wow, okay, so we haven't really defined very much here so far what our strategic advantage is, except I'm trying to advocate that it's about doing things, together, international by design, by alliance, by partnership, and so on. But there are sort of three component parts. One is resource, another one's position, the other one's leverage. So the resource bit, we've heard, brilliantly that industry is another domain that we should embrace. If you put all the alliance partners together, and industry, you've got mass, you've got the ability to do it, and also, of course, the ability to sustain over time. Because yes, it's true that some companies, might not succeed. Some small enterprises may fail, but actually, you can learn from the failures. And if you've got enough mass in enough industries and companies working together from across different nations, you can overcome that problem. We've got a positional advantage in the sense that. We've got geographically, you can talk about what position we have. The fact is that the UK and its allies and partners can operate from the sea at any point around the globe. We are a globally maneuverist nation. We've also got the positional advantage of speed. We can move quickly. That's the amazing thing. The speed of development in the Royal Navy at the moment is utterly astonishing. The speed at which experimental vessels were acquired, and then new tech worked up, it demonstrates, it's proven, it's evidence that we can do that. We can use that positional advantage, not just geographically, as I say, but also in terms of the speed at which we act. The one that gives me some concern is this idea of leverage, the strategic advantage through leverage, because that is about what actions we take. Do we deny by simply remaining passive and defensive? Do we adopt a lack of strategic initiative and just wait until something happens to us because we say, well, we're defensive? Or do we take a more proactive approach to strategy and to our leverage by saying, actually, hell no, we will not tolerate certain coercive actions against our sovereignty, either individually or collectively. We will push back against some of these assertive and aggressive actions. Look at the way the Philippines has been inspiring everyone by saying, we're going to continue to demonstrate our sovereign right to the Second Thomas Shoal, despite all the intimidation that's being imposed upon us. That's the sort of thing we do. I am worried about the leverage element because it's about what level of risk we're prepared to take. Risk in industry, how much are we prepared to risk? How much risk are we going to be permitted to take in terms of rules of engagement? Strategic risk, what are we prepared to do? Or are we self-deterring? Are we sort of still holding back, a bit reticent? If we do anything, oh gosh, it might risk escalation. No, now is the time to restore a little bit Nelsonian spirit, I think. Engage more closely.
Thank you. Rear Admiral Parkin, the wider society, of course, undeniably plays a very important role in this endeavor. And how can we raise the maritime IQ of the nation, in your view?
So, Rob's book.
Actually, no, Kevin's book.
It's a really good question. 10 years ago, I worked for the late Admiral Clive Johnson as his Chief of Staff for Naval Strategy on the Naval Staff, and it was the run-up towards the 2015 Defence Review. And the experts in the Navy communications team had an idea that a series of adverts and vignettes that explained the nation's reliance on the maritime could take the shape of a supermarket where suddenly, as sea lanes were blocked, the shelves emptied sort of magically by CGI. And as the cables were interrupted, the lights would go off. And as the interruptions to our tax revenue from the lack of financial transactions happened, people's bank balances would empty. And the Central Ministry of Defence media team at the time felt that that was completely inappropriate because it would scare the nation. And it would not be seen as a positive message about the importance of the maritime. It would be seen as a negative message about our vulnerability. And they possibly were right. But as I said earlier, as the maritime case becomes more compelling, it is a battle of narratives against, not between us and other government departments or other services, it's between the narrative of our future as a maritime nation and our reliance on those seabed lines of communication and maritime trade. But also, the countervailing viewpoint is ignorance. No one can argue with what Rob and Geoff and Andrew have said, and no one in particular can dispute the facts of our status as an island nation with, by the way, 14 overseas territories on every ocean on the planet, almost all of which are islands or pseudo-islands. And when you look at the way in which Australia has come to accept its maritime future, not as a zero-sum game, but as an additive, as First Sea Lord said, it's an and, not an or, then the nation, I think, would be fascinated. The minister's dog walks in Amble and Berwick would prompt a conversation that perhaps hasn't happened since the Falklands War. The role of our young men, our young women, our sailors, marines, and members of the other services in action in the heaviest maritime warfighting for 40 years at a time when we haven't seen anything yet, I think galvanizes us as a naval community, as a wider maritime family of interested people. Everyone in this room and watching online is interested for a reason. And I'm not entirely certain whether the nation's ready to hear it, because the moment you point out reliance, you're pointing out vulnerabilities. And the moment that you are understanding your, what we call in campaigning terms, your center of gravity, you're almost self-identifying where the bad guys should go next. So it's a combination of being proud of what we're doing, being objective and realistic about what we can do, but also making the case about what we should do next. Because arguably we've been getting by on a third-party fire and theft insurance policy as a nation. And the nation needs a fully comprehensive insurance policy. And the time to find out that you should have invested is not when you're in a crash.
Thank you. We have 20 minutes left, so it's time to begin our Q&A session.